Welcome. In some denominations, you'd make a trip to the pastor's study for answers to the really tough questions. Well, let's see what we can do here. Merry meet, blessed be. Depending on how you reached here, I'm Aidan Odinson or Bishop Cal Lippitt, and welcome to another session in a very different pastor study. A few years ago, there was a advertising slogan by the people that sold milk. People in various poses, all with milk mustaches, and the saying, "Got milk?" I wonder what it would be like if we had a campaign of people in various poses doing various things. In my case, it would be in my robes doing the things that a priest would do, or a bishop or a high priest. And the saying, "Got guts?" I remember very recently there was a picture circulating on Facebook, supposedly from the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy meeting the Cowardly Lion, the Scarecrow, and the Tin Man. And she says to them, "No courage? No brain? No heart? What are you, politicians?" No kidding. Only my reply was, well, could also be government bureaucrats or certain church officials. And I remember certain church officials. There was a time when I recognized that there was a group of people that one particular church was largely ignoring. For the most part, ignoring. There was a token effort that they didn't have to pay for. But other than that, actually there's even less effort now. I had an idea of how to answer that. And I thought it would work. There were a few chaplains who thought it might be a good idea. But when it came to the church hierarchy, it was always, "Gee, I'd love to help you, but..." And I got so tired of hearing the, "Gee, I'd love to help you, but..." And I realized that they weren't really interested in helping, or they didn't want to rock the boat. They didn't want to do anything different. And maybe they just weren't interested in really seeing what can be done about the men and women of the armed forces being able to receive sacraments. Yeah. Sometimes you've got to have guts. Sometimes you've got to have courage. Sometimes it's to make a change, sometimes it's to keep a change from happening. A lot of churches are getting pretty much boiled over in various social, political causes to the point where people don't even recognize the church that they used to go to anymore. And that's a problem. And here's where you've got to know the difference. And both ways require courage. Once upon a time, black people and white people didn't go to church in the same church. It was unheard of. As a matter of fact, there was recently a controversy. It's still happening. A couple in Mississippi, they'd been attending a church, And there never was a problem until they wanted to get married. Well, the church was predominantly white, and they were black. And they were told to find a church, find a black church to go get married at. Well, they backpedaled. That church backpedaled after they got the publicity, and the convention that they belonged to had some words for them too. And it turned out it was a few loudmouth lay people, not the clergy. Okay. Do you know that in the 1800s there were still plenty of Christians who were teaching that women did not have souls? And in the days when Jim Crow was being enforced in the South, people were looking to their Bibles for justification. Well, those are some cases where you've got to use courage and a good solid basis to bring about the change. On the other hand, recently in a church at their general convention, they passed a couple of new rules for their denomination, one of which was that you don't have to be baptized to receive communion, which basically upends all teaching on the subject that's been going on practically since the Last Supper. And then you've got a very wordy little thing that they passed, which basically says that all sexual orientations, unless otherwise prohibited, are protected classes. I could go into more, but now the problem with that, number one, is, yeah, it says unless otherwise prohibited. Now, if you've been around the pike any, you could imagine there are people who are trying to figure out how many different ways might there be that they haven't thought of to prohibit, and what's on the list and what's not. I can't tell you. And I would have to go to one of their canon lawyers, and I'm not going to, because I don't particularly want to have that much to do with their officialdom, except for certain people, certain key people that I would love to work with. However, when the winds of fad blow the wrong way, sometimes you've just got to say, hold it, I'm not going there. And all this boils into something else, which also has to do with toleration and acceptance. A basic principle that I've learned over the years. I've learned it, I've enjoyed it, and it's helped me tremendously. And that is this basic principle. People who are comfortable with who they are will be comfortable with those who are different. Now, that doesn't mean that you necessarily include any and all of them into everything you do. There may be some things that you're involved with that they just can't be a part of. On the other hand, there may be some things where it's just not going to matter. And so, yeah, for instance, I have some very good friends who are gay. I have some very good friends who are black. And so what? I also respect and have some very good friends who are Roman Catholic. I will never forget the wonderful teaching I received from a Jodo Shinshu priest. I could go on down the list. Now that doesn't mean that I'm going to bring in the Jodo Shinshu priest to teach from my pulpit. And I'm not going to stand in his pulpit. But we can share. And that's... I remember that principle even got me into trouble once. Okay, I took the converse. There's a group out in Oregon, very vocal anti-gay. And they had a little booth at a shopping mall. And I got myself in trouble with them, and I think if I went back there after all these years, probably somebody would recognize me. All I did was say, scratch a homophobe and find a faggot. Why? Because if they're so rabid, anti, then they can't be very comfortable with who they are. Same way with people who try to push too much where they are. These people who try to force themselves and their religion on me at a certain train station that I have to transit every day to and from work. And when I tell them that I'm clergy of another faith, oh boy. Yeah. They're not comfortable with where they are. Their faith is weak. Yes. Their faith is weak. Or they'd be able to accept me. They'd be able to accept you. And people who are comfortable with who they are comfortable with people who are different. And if that's, well, that's got to be a pretty good reason to learn all the more about where you're at, so you can get comfortable with yourself. When you get comfortable with yourself, then you can get more comfortable with others. I'm Aidan, or Bishop Cal. Blessed be. This has been a presentation of the Wise Ones Net. Merry part and blessed be.